Hi and welcome to my podcast. I haven't still yet figured out how to do this eye contact through the lens and stuff like that. So it might be that I'm looking at the screen and looking at the lens differently sometimes. So I hope you will excuse me. So anyway, my name is Stig Lennart Sørensen and I am a teacher and photographer based here in Tromsø, Norway. I'm also a teacher in psychology and social science, but I have a separate YouTube channel for that content. As I said earlier, the content of this series of podcasts will deal mostly with photography, role-playing games, and other things on my mind. And this is also an ongoing test project, so I hope you will bear with me in case there are some technical hiccups during my live stream. And I also apologize for the bad audio last time. I hope I have it fixed this time, so the sound of my voice is not so low as it was the last time. And in case you weren't able to hear what I said properly, the automatically generated subtitles actually made sense of what I said. Believe it or not. So if you like, you can try to watch again, but with the subtitles enabled. Then you will be able to see what I talked about last time. So again, I shoot portraits and alternative fashion photography, and I love to create stories with my photos. At least that's what I hope my photography conveys, a sort of visual context which enables the viewer to interpret his or her understanding of the photo. As I said earlier, my greatest fear as a photographer is that my work is cliché or unoriginal. But I think that's a fear of all creatives, that the work one does is just a rehash, a repeat, or even worse, a copy of someone's else work. With that in mind, I still believe one can create original content based, at least for yourself, based on artwork one has experienced. Because a sense of art is, after all, built on impressions and affect from an unknown number of sensory inputs throughout your life. And it would be very wrong to assume that all art is without any sort of contextual anchor in a way. No art is created in vacuum. And how you create it will of course be based on what techniques you have seen other artists use in their work. So photography is an art form that is usually based on the moment it captures, and often it is not very deliberate as such. And this is particularly true for street photography and other documentary forms of photography. In such a case, the experience and mindset of the photographer sets the premise for the result in a way. As I said to my pupils and my mentoree, you can often discern the sex of the photographer by looking at how the photographer frames the photo and how he or she and what he or she deems interesting. A composition may reveal the cultural background and training of the photographer. And a quick test for you viewers would be to do a blind test. Look at a random photographic work without knowing anything about the photographer and try to guess what kind of person this photographer is. And then afterwards, look up the information about the photographer. I think you would be surprised after some time to see how much personality is told through the technique and the theme of the photograph. This is a good training exercise to be able to discern between how photographers work, I think. So, but today's topic, I would like to talk about my current obsession, which is Renaissance paintings, which in its day and age took a long time to execute. Execute is a fancy word of saying finishing painting a painting. So when you made a painting back in the old days, in Renaissance, it took everything from maybe a couple of days to several months, maybe a year. So that's a complete different experience than taking a photograph. And I've been particularly obsessed with portraits by Hans Holbein, who was a painter that lived from 1497 to 1543. That's 500 years ago. And he is still considered a very prominent artist, and whose work still resonates today with a modern audience. But to put it in perspective, anyway, Holbein painted the super powerful and the mega rich of the day, the 1% of the Renaissance, the English king and his court. So the portraits are not of a typical person of that time, but still I think some of his work is striking, especially if you look at some of his sketches, which I now will show on the screen. And doing this, there you go. So this is what strikes me is here is an artist that, even though the sitter's gaze and pose is ice cold, like this is the noble class, they are the most powerful people in England at the time, he still manages to make really naturalistic sketches. And I think he managed to create this connection in a way that is not very often seen in paintings from his contemporaries from the same time period. And he manages actually to make this very true to life sketches of the sitter. The sitter is another name for the person who's being painted, by the way. And this is what I love about Holbein's art, is that when you replace this kind of iconography and flat perspective and replace it with a super realistic sketch, it really brings them to life, doesn't it? I mean, you can sort of discern through the sketch a little bit about their personality, and it looks like someone from today. It could almost look like we are browsing through pre-production sketches for a fantasy movie. So I have been looking at Holbein's paintings and the paintings of other Renaissance artists and trying to get an idea of how to do something similar in the photo studio. So it's no longer a moment to be captured, it's about planning long time ahead. Because what is different is that the photograph in a Renaissance settings such as this is of course immediate. You press the button and takes a picture, but you spend a lot of time putting the model and things into the frame. It's almost the opposite in a painting. You spend a lot of time on the post-production in a way, the painting process itself. You spend perhaps many months to finish a painting. Anyway, I will now try to lead you through my thoughts on recreating, which is what I want to do, such a painting in the photo studio. And I'm not any art expert by any way, so this is very basic analysis of what I have been doing research on. What is in a typical Renaissance painting? Well, the sitter obviously often dressed in their finest and most expensive clothes. You could always compare it to showing off on Instagram. Look at this expensive suit I bought. And what about this new iPhone I'm accidentally holding up to the camera? You can also see there is a drapery or a curtain behind the sitter. For a male subject, I've noted the color is often green. For a female sitter, it's often a pale blue color. Landscape is often popular. Just think of the mountains behind Mona Lisa. Also, often the sitter, the person being painted, leans on a table, sits next to it. Let me see if I can find a picture here. Okay, we can take this one. on the table is a tablecloth. The tables sometimes, or almost every time, at least in Holbein's painting, have objects that are either important to the sitter or that the painter have used to convey some sort of meaning. The skull is a classical example, because the skull means death, and one shall not value things so much in life because they will have no value once you are gone. And this photo on the screen right now is called The Ambassadors. It's a good example of how he uses objects in the scene to send a deeper message to the viewer. We can have a look at how the top shelves compares to what's on the bottom shelf. You see that the top shelf have objects related to the heavens, like measuring distance and observing the time. It's science. While the bottom shelf has objects related to more earthly desires. There is a lute, for instance, and a bunch of flutes. In a modern setting, maybe a PlayStation 5 would take its place. Also, this is difficult to see on this photo. I'll try to find it. On the flute, you will see that if you zoom in here, I can zoom in more, but up here you will see there is a broken string. And the broken string in this painting of the ambassadors has a hidden meaning, because as a broken string means discord. And at that time, the people in the painting were Catholics, and they were diplomats in an England that has just converted to Lutheranism. So there's a discord between religion, which is sort of conveyed in a secret message through a broken string on the lute. And of course you have the skull, which is floating in front of the, let me see if I can go back to it. Sorry about the scroll through. I haven't really figured out how to do proper slideshow. And of course you have this skull which is floating in front of the ambassadors. It's distorted in such a way that you can't see it properly unless you look at the painting from the side and higher up. And it has been speculated that the painting was placed to the side of the entrance. So when you came down the staircase into the room where the painting was displayed, the first thing you saw was the skull, because you can't see it unless you see it from the side. I can have a picture of it here. You can see it from the side. This is how it looks like when you see the painting from the side a little bit up. Then you see sort of this skull, which is distorted when you see it in front, sort of slowly getting into its original shape if you look to it on the side. Sneaky technique. So I want to do something similar, but with a modern context. I'm a little bit unsure about the lighting, because there is no catch light or anything in their eyes. If I zoom into their eyes, and this is low resolution, you see all the paintings from the Renaissance, and there's almost nobody who has catch light, so you can't really tell what kind of lighting the painter may have used. But in general, I think you see a little bit shadow on the left side here, so I think we can say that there's a light source to the right here, a big light source. Of course, this is a painting also, so it has not a Renaissance painting, so it doesn't have some super advanced shadow techniques which you see later on. So it's kind of a flat painting in a way, in terms of lighting. So anyway, so how would a modern interpretation of such a painting be? Maybe that requires us to take a step back from our world, even time, and try to look at what we consider valuable. For instance, I could ask you, what would you like to see placed next to you in a painting of you? What would you like to see on the table, which would have some sort of value for you. It's difficult. But what is interesting also is that what constitutes luxury items in our day and age? This is a question I've been asking people when I've been sort of talking about this project. Is it an iPad Pro with the M chip? Is it an expensive Rolex watch on your wrist? Or is it a Gucci coat? Is that something you would sort of wear to a painting if you would do it today? And if you go back to the picture of the ambassadors, the items displayed would be important to the sitters. So the items in a modern setting should be important to our modern sitter. Maybe to do with the current work, maybe. But when I try to think of things, it becomes difficult. Another thing to consider is that should this photograph be a comment on our society, or should this be a personal portrait of the person I'm taking the photo of? I will explain. If it is a comment on our current obsession with shiny new things, then the item could almost be satirical in nature. If it is a personal portrait, I cannot assume the person who comes to the photo studio would like to be displayed with luxury items. And the reason for that is that displaying wealth is considered bad taste, at least in Scandinavia. And at least in a photograph, which you maybe use on Facebook or any other place where you sort of want to show off your best side. But we find more sneaky ways to signal how much money we have, that's for sure. Even though it's considered bad taste to show off your wealth, how much money you have, there's still other ways you can sort of signal to others how much money you have. More sneaky ways in a way to signal this. And then it's just to take a walk in the neighborhood and try to find out how people display their wealth. It's more subdued in Scandinavia, I think, but still, there may be a new Tesla placed, parked strategically close to the road. Maybe some curtains that is really expensive. It depends. But I have a story. A friend of mine told me that among certain lawyers in my city, you signal your wealth through what kind of wristwatch you were wearing. So for those in the know, that is people who are interested in wristwatches, that is, you can tell from a quick glance, can look very quickly at your wrist and sort of know how much money you're willing to spend on a luxury item. Because everybody else, when we check our time, we just look at the phone to see what time it is. But having this sort of offhand, or not offhand, but really subtle way to display your wealth is sort of, okay, someone asks what time it is, and you just took a look at your wristwatch and you do like this and put your sleeve a little bit back, and everybody can see what kind of watch you have. Also in Tromsø, which is because of our climate, we have Canada Goose parkas. These are, winter jackets. These are used for status signaling. For those who don't know what Canada Goose parkas are, there are expensive winter jackets that cost more than 8,000 Norwegian kroner or $1,000. So it's a very expensive piece of clothing, because you can buy a usual parkas for maybe 1/8 of the price and still have the same comfortable in the winter. But what I think makes it attractive is because parkas looks more or less the same. It's because the logo, the name of the company, Canada Goose, is displayed prominently on the shoulder. So it's very easy to see from a distance what kind of label you're wearing. So people can see, okay, this guy has a Canada Goose jacket, so he must be able to afford this jacket. That means he has a lot of money. So anyway, I could go on and on about how we display social, economic and cultural status, but maybe I do want to bore you to death where I talk about Pierre Bourdieu and his cultural capital. So maybe I do want to put you to sleep properly. So back to my project. I think that a more general approach is better instead of a personal portrait. Because I don't think a person would be comfortable posing with her luxury items. If I ask someone to come to the studio and bring items that are important to them, they would not bring, I believe, luxury items. They would bring items that have more of a sentimental value, maybe a photo album or a necklace their grandmother gave them, etc. So it's better if it becomes a general approach, because where I take a model and set up the stage and put in things which might be typical of our age, and sort of in that way beckon back to the Renaissance. So what kind of items should I use then? I had a couple conversations with people, and for instance, red beats headphones, because red was the color for the kings in the old times. Expensive camera maybe. Any Apple device, obviously, because they're really expensive. I am open to any sort of suggestion if anyone is watching, so you can write in the comment if you like. And one more thing before I move on. If you notice on the paintings by Holbein and other Renaissance painters, you will see that the items often are placed on the edge of the table. I don't know if you see here, but so the reason for that is it's like just a little nudge and they will fall off and be destroyed. And that again is something to do with what the painter Holbein wanted to convey, was this, that the items we have desire when we are alive, they can easily be destroyed or we can lose them. So putting expensive things on the table so that they're in danger of falling off is also something that you can see in the photos. And let me see here if I can go back to I have one here. Yeah, okay. So I did a quick mock-up in Procreate. I don't know if you can see, but sort of you can see on the to the right here, I have made a quick mock-up of a painting or a portrait then done in the Renaissance style, and I put a Sony camera on the edge of the table. So yeah, and two more concrete things in terms of lighting. Again, I don't know how I should do it. I have tried out some Rembrandt lighting. I can give you some example of that. Let me see here. This Windows slideshow thing is not really working very well. So I did I done a couple of shoots where I tried to use Rembrandt lighting, which is you get this triangle of light on the shadow side of the face, and etc., etc. So you can look it up. It's not really, it's something that all photographers at one stage try to do in their work, and I tried that also. So, but it sort of creates really moody and really expressive photos, I think. So. And this photo actually led me to, because this model, Kjell Petter, he has said he wanted to do this Renaissance shoot. So we are going to do one. And the reason was, when we looked at this photo and we talked a little bit about it, it seemed like a good opportunity to sort of bring it to bring a Renaissance painting into a modern setting. But here I have only one source of light. It's the biggest softbox in the studio, and it's placed so that the light goes straight across. If you sort of imagine the camera there, and you have the softbox here, and the light goes 90 degrees perpendicular to the camera, and the person who I'm taking picture of is actually standing a little bit behind. So it's sort of very indirect light from the softbox falls on the face of the model. And also you have to place the model really close to the softbox because of the fall off, because we would like to see a dramatic fall off. You see the best fall off when you place a light very close to someone. You will see that the highlights and the shadows are very close together. If you put the light very far off in the distance, you will see that the light becomes very flat because of the nature of the fall off of light. So you have to put the softbox very close to the model. Then you will have this very dramatic, where you have very extreme highlights on the side towards the softbox. And suddenly this fall off to shadows on the other side is really fun way to try out Rembrandt lighting or any sort of dramatic lighting. Also here with Maria, I did the same thing. Just one light, only one light, and to the side, and she's behind the light, and we are working with the mood, and she hit this really great pose, her expressive eyes, everything, you had the photo. I also did something where I did with a big sheet of textile. I think it was 2 by 3 meters, and hang it up on a boom vertically, put a softbox behind it, and shot directly through this homemade mega softbox, and this creates a very soft light from the side, which also can be used to do this kind of dramatic shadows, also to put the model close so you have this fall off. The difference is that you have more sort of, the light falls on more parts of the body, and also it looks like it's lit by a window, but it's actually lit inside the studio, so it's no natural light here, it's just a flash, and you can also see it in the eyes. And one thing I should add is that I used here when you compare this photo to the other photos, you will see that in the eyes here you see this little pin of light. And that's I use a beauty dish, which is situated right above my head, which I use to soften up the shadows a bit, and also to give this signature key light in the eye, because otherwise the light would look lifeless if you don't have any sort of this little pinpoint of light in the eye. Sometimes you need to have it sometimes. So yeah, I think I talked already almost 30 minutes. I will just quickly round off by looking at, let me see here, the colors again. This is, I did a quick palette lookup on the ambassadors, and you see a lot of reds, muted browns, and green. So these are the colors I would like to use in my project. So I think in terms of color, I haven't really had the time to do a proper research on it. There's a lot of things you can learn about color, but of course color is important. You have to have colors which are use the color wheel, and you sort of find out which color complement each other. You can use 2 color or 3 color, etc., etc. But I haven't had real time. It depends also what kind of clothes we get. So we have to do that kind of decision of what kind of colors which you use in the photo. That will have to be left to until we get the clothes in and we are ready to shoot. Yeah, I think that's it for today, and I hope you found this a little bit interesting. Wish you a great day, and next week wish you the best. And see you